New at NAMT, the next wave of musical theater writers, is a bite-sized series dedicated to spotlighting the emerging voices in musical theater. Every interview provides a unique glimpse into the creative minds behind the next big musicals. So whether you're a producer, theater lover, or even simply curious about the future of musical theater, New at NAMT offers a front row seat to a new generation of creators. Now, New at NAMT Season 3 Artist leaders will highlight associate artistic directors and artistic producers from NAMT member organizations. It's time to lower the lights, raise the curtain, and LX1 go on New at NAMT. I am your host, Jean-Paul Yovanoff from Musical Theater Radio, and joining me for Season 3 as co-host is the New Works Associate at NAMT, Skye Cone Ivey. Hello, Skye. How you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. I wanted to share a quick festival update before we get started
Great.
today. So we are currently in round two of the festival selection process. This year we received 537 submissions, which included 962 writers from around the globe. So round one submissions were evaluated by our round one screening committee. This was a group of 85 NAMT members, non-submitting writer and emerging artist alumni, festival directors, dramaturgs, producers, and more from the NAMT community. I manage that group, which we affectionately call our round one readers, which mostly means that their inboxes are very full of email reminders from me. But their level of excitement for new musicals means I don't have to bug them too much, which is great. And now in round two, the festival committee has taken over. So they'll select the finalists soon, and then they'll select the 8 festival musicals in June. And the full festival lineup will be announced in early July. And our guest today is actually a member of the festival committee.
Very nice. It sounds like you don't have enough to do. Maybe we'll put some
Yeah,
more on your
no,
plate.
sure.
Awesome. You know what? Let's jump right into the interview. Today we are speaking with Michael Fling. Now, Michael just celebrated his 5th anniversary at Goodspeed Musicals, where he oversees Goodspeed's extensive new works initiatives as the associate artistic director, including the Festival of New Musicals, Johnny Mercer Foundation Writers Grove, and the GoodWorks Commissioning Program. Michael has worked as a director at Goodspeed, Craft Productions of Oklahoma, Abilene Opera, and as an associate director at TheaterWorks Hartford, Repertory Theater of St. Louis, and the Muni. He also hosts the popular musical theater podcast Know the Show and holds a degree in directing from the Conservatory of Theater Arts at Webster University. Michael, welcome to New at NAMT.
Happy to be here. It was a little, it was funny that Skye was talking about the festival committee, and I was like, we sure are in the middle of round two because I just read 20 musicals.
Yeah, he
And
did.
I'm like, I have my like notes. I'm like staring down at my desk. I'm like, I have my pile. Skye knows I take my notes like on actual paper and then I put them all into the scoring program later. So I'm like, I'm staring at my notes. I'm like, God, I hope I remember when we sit around to talk about it, all the things about the shows. But yeah, it's always great to be a part of NAMT and to be in conversation with you all.
Well, thanks so much for being here. Let's get started with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? Where did your love for theater begin, and what led you to the work you do today?
Well, I cannot remember a time that I did not love theater, and specifically musicals. I mean, let's be honest, musicals. And growing up in Oklahoma, which I do not think is the irony is not lost on me that the musical that changed all of musical theater is where, in fact, I'm from, and the musical I have seen more than any other musical on the face of the planet. And I love it, to be fair. And also, you have not seen Oklahoma until you have seen it in the state of Oklahoma. It is a different experience. Shout out to Lyric Theater of Oklahoma, who I think is doing it this summer, actually.
I think you're
And
right. Yeah.
you should absolutely go see it because it is a different experience. It's a different experience. And not Daniel Fish's Oklahoma for sure not. That's all to say, I have loved musicals for as long as I can remember. And then I did my first show in second grade when my grandma came home from a community Christmas choir concert and said, Memorial High School is doing The Music Man, and you look like Ron Howard. You have to audition. And I went to that audition and I got the part and haven't really looked back since. And So that took me, I did high school theater and community theater as a kid, and then went to school at Webster, which you said in my bio, and started working in the community while I was still in college. And that has, my life has taken me ever eastward. I've only gone further and further to the East Coast in life. And freelanced out of New York for a number of years, and then was landed at Goodspeed right before the world shut down, which was very fortuitous timing. And yeah, so that's the short version of my bio.
Tell us more about your role at Goodspeed Musicals and the organization's history with new works.
So Goodspeed has certainly become known in the industry as like a leader of in revivals of musicals. We are a classic opera house, a very intimate space, and we're well known for our first class revivals that we do of shows, and a real like niche that we carved out in our history of doing not often produced productions of lesser known musicals, basically before encores existed. And that was really our bread and butter. But we also, in that time, always had a new musical as a part of our season. That's always been a part of Goodspeed. Most famously, in the case of Annie, which premiered on our stage in 1976, before moving to Broadway in 77, but also a little show called Man of La Mancha, which premiered here before it went to Broadway in the 60s. Shenandoah, which is lesser known now, and most recently, Irving Berlin's Holiday Inn, which premiered on our stage in 2014. So that is just our main stage. And then about 40 years ago, we opened the Norma Terrace Theater, which is our secondary space in Chester, Connecticut, actually where I live. It's the town over from East Haddam, in our small town Connecticut existence. And the Norma Terrace is dedicated almost exclusively to the development of new work and has been for its entire history. Annie provided us with some people know a very historic royalty that is like never repeated again, and we got a lot of money from Annie, which is really great, and has buoyed the organization in a myriad of ways over the years. But one of them is that we chose to continue to invest in new work. So and the Norma Terrace is a key part of that. So at the Norma Terrace, we've produced a number of shows that have gone on to Broadway, some bigger hits than others. But All Shook Up, which premiered at the Terrace, which we're doing a 20th anniversary production of this year. The Story of My Life, Jason Robert Brown's 13. And I'm sure there are others that I am forgetting off of the top of my head, but a lot of pieces that we're really proud to have put into the musical theater ecosystem. And so on top of that, that's the top of the pipeline. But then we have all of the things that we do up to that point. So we have the GoodWorks Commissioning Program, which we launched a couple years ago. And that is we've commissioned two writers so far and about to do another two to create work, new musicals that we, in the world of commissioning, we have the first right of refusal, basically, which is a lovely, lovely and exciting process to be a part of. And then we partner with the Johnny Mercer Foundation to host the Writers Grove, which is a writers retreat that happens in the winter, where we turn over all of our actor housing essentially to the teams of new musicals and give them a house and a piano and a printer and a private room and private existence as a team to hibernate and get a lot of work done. And it's a really special program that we love to do. And the hallmark of that program really is that we all gather in the evenings to have pretentiously salons, but I like to call share sessions because I like to be colloquial, where the writers can share the work that they've been working on during the day for feedback from the other writers. It's a peer-to-peer program. So we take a lot of pride in hosting that, but not inserting ourselves into that. So we're there and we're around, but like it's one of the greatest gifts of my job and my life truly to just stand in the back of that room and listen to brilliant people give brilliant notes to each other and actually not say a thing for like 4 weeks and just soak in the creation of new amazing musicals. And there are a number of really great shows that have passed through the Grove over the years. And then we also have our Festival of New Musicals, which is also happens during our off season, but we do 3 music stand presentations of new musicals, 2 cabarets that are again an additional kind of residency program, and we partner with the Hart School and at this point Western Connecticut State University to make those things happen. So they're joint education programs and helping emerging musical theater performers understand what it is to be a part of the New Works process. So that's just a brief glimpse on top of all the other things, actually producing a season and the revivals that we do. And the new work that we continue to do on the Opera House stage, which is really important to Donna Lynn, who's our artistic director and kind of existed in my seat, even though it wasn't called associate artistic director prior to being in that role. So we love new work at Goodspeed. And in a weird way, depending on how you interact with us, it's funny to me how you interact with Goodspeed. Like some people, we just in their minds, like we just do revivals and we do amazing, amazing revivals. And then for other people, it's like, oh, well, you do like new work and like other places like don't do as much new work, but like in a weird way, the circles like don't overlap for people. Like you either know us as one or the other. So it just kind of depends in which. And then unless you're at NAMT, and then you kind of know that we do all of it. But if you're not like at NAMT, maybe you don't know that. So an interesting it's an interesting existence to have a large profile in both spaces, which is sort of unique about us as an organization.
Can you talk to us more about the Johnny Mercer Foundation Writers Grove and how Goodspeed approaches supporting new musicals and emerging writers?
Yeah, so the Grove is like our we meet a ton of new artists and writers through the Grove process, which is an invitation only process. You have to be nominated. We have a group of industry peers that we go to every year and say, who are the new voices and exciting people that you're meeting or you've interacted with, who you think might benefit from basically a 2-week residency in the middle of Connecticut, in the woods of Connecticut in the winter where you really can't do anything but write. And that phenomenal group of nominators sends us some names, and then we send invitations to submit for consideration. So it's a pretty extensive process, but application, and then so we go through an adjudication process, and then we invite roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of like 18 to 20 teams per year are able to be a part of the Grove, or 18 to 20 projects, because it's based on the housing availability that we have. And then the Grove is really, I like to describe it as a pick your own adventure residency, where we really, we ask for your goals of what you think you would want to accomplish if you had 2 weeks in the woods. But we're not gonna like hold you to that in a certain way. Like because the application process starts in the summer and the program doesn't actually happen until like January, February. And as you and most of your listeners know, a lot can happen to a musical in those 6 months. Sometimes things don't happen at all, and that's totally fine. But that's a long time. So basically, we have regular check-ins once they're admitted. We have a check-in and we ask, hey, we know you wrote these goals like 2, 3 months ago. Are those still your goals? Is that now that you have this opportunity, is that actually what you want to do? Blah, 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 and seek out what kind of things they're hoping to do. But while they're here, we have a resident dramaturg who is available to them for individual consultation and feedback on their projects. We also have a resident producer who is also sort of a dramaturg, but can help talk through some business things and some like positioning of your show or places that might be a good fit for further development of your show, but also a very insightful dramaturg himself. And we have Jonathan Brielle, who's the vice president of the Mercer Foundation and co-founder of the program, essentially co-creator of the program, who exists as a music mentor and is able to help and give quite great, insightful notes on shows, as well as the entirety of the Goodspeed artistic staff. So the writers who come have access to a variety of different voices in terms of, if you vibe with one voice and not with another, like that's totally cool. But basically we leave the writers to themselves, and like the only structure of the residency is the gathering at 6 o'clock every night, which we encourage everyone to come. But if it's not a space that you feel super welcome in, or what I tell people basically is we want you to come and it's great and we think it's super valuable. And like I encourage everyone, if it's 5:45 and you're really stuck on some moment in your show, you're not really sure, and it's just like cold and you don't want to, you would rather just kind of stay and hibernate, like put on your shoes and a coat and like pop over, have some wine and cheese, and think about not your show for 90 minutes. And I promise something is gonna unlock and unlodge. And the flip side is if it's 5:45 and you said you wanted to present tonight and share, but you're cooking with gas and you're like writing and you're in flow, ditch us. Don't come to I don't care. Don't come to the salon. Like stay and be in process. Like the point is to get you into flow and to get you to create and do and be as productive as you're capable of being. And that tends to work out pretty well. People are immensely productive during it. So like I said, we call it a pick your own adventure because like, if there are shows that come that are a paragraph of an idea and they haven't written a note of music, they submit demos from other projects, but this is their passion dream project and they are in the initial forming stages of an outline or some musical soundscape or anything, all the way to we're going into production this summer and we're doing final nips and tucks and things, or we just had two readings and we haven't had time to implement any of these notes, so we're in a massive, or we wrote a draft and it's terrible and we need to do a page one rewrite. We have all different sorts of things that come to the Grove, so it really is I've said it three times now, but it's a pick your own adventure because, we have a music team that is here to support and help with transcribing, playing for you if you are not a player yourself, which many writers are not like piano players themselves these days. That is just a natural evolution of technology, basically has opened that door for a lot of people. And then we also have our Library of Musical Theater, which people kind of don't know about, which is the largest collection outside of Lincoln Center of musical theater and theater related items, which is like totally open to the writers and a nerd's paradise. So there really is, like, you can spend the time doing almost whatever. And and we also have had people who apply with one project, think they're going to work on that project, and then oops, they didn't get the rights to that project. And so they come and they're like, you know what? I've had this other idea and I want to work on that. And that happened to Marshall Palet, who wrote Private Jones, which was a NAMT show in 2021. He wrote the entire first act of Private Jones at the Writers Grove, and it was a mistake because he didn't get the rights to something that he had applied with. And so he worked on his dream idea, and it is a work of genius that if you have not heard of Private Jones or whatnot, I sincerely hope you go Google it and listen to it or see it and in some future state because it is a brilliant work of musical theater. So yeah, the support is whatever the project needs. It and not I think the true lesson of musical theater development is like every project is different. There is no cookie cutter, and but there are cookie cutter things you can give people that they can use to their advantage. As long as they understand, like, that it's like, okay, here's the palette of things. Which of these is going to be helpful to you? Or how can we combine these two things to be of most help and service to you? But yeah, so that's a lot of our philosophy on new work development. Is like
Very
it's
cool.
very artist forward, and I'd say that like in a sounds somewhat self-congratulatory, but we do kind of let them dictate what they need.
As a writer, this sounds like an incredible opportunity. So I'm going to look into it too. Um,
People love it. I mean, I hate to, like, we get our feedback forms and it's like, this was the best 2 weeks of my life. And I'm like, that's wonderful. I'm so glad. It's like embarrassing on a certain level because you're like, well, in some ways, I'm just giving you like, I really, really, I mean, we have fun and it's great and I love it, but it's kind of an amazing thing that like, there's just not a lot of places that exist like that, specifically for musical development that are just about musicals, that aren't residency programs, that also have filmmakers and writers and like narrative writers or poetry writers, like or classical composers. Like those kinds of hives exist, but solely musical theater that they get to be in community with one another is sadly not super common.
well, I'm curious, what kind of artists or projects does your organization prioritize supporting?
I mean, when it comes to the Grove, I tell everyone to apply with the project that they are most excited about. That is the center of their heart, because that may not be the thing that is the most commercially viable. That may not be the thing that is the most, I want to say accessible, but it may not be the most like the thing that every theater is going to pick up for development, but it might be the most exciting thing you ever create. And the Grove is a no pressure environment in which to create. So I encourage everyone to take advantage of that with this, whatever their heart's desire is. Now, that sometimes is the project that you are working on that is intensely commercial and you need the 2 weeks, and that's totally fine too. But in terms of what we support prioritizing or prioritize supporting, there isn't one simple answer. I think at the end of the day, we as an organization, because we are not, in New York and we are in rural Connecticut, which is progressive, but it's not New York City. And I'm very fond of saying that like Manhattan producing for Manhattan, Kansas is different than producing for Manhattan, New York. And there are realities of things that our audience is ready to take in and things that our audience is not quite ready to take in. And we would love to put some of those daring work in front of our audience. And sometimes we do, and we push the envelope, but we can't do it all the time. So I think in general, a lot of people probably view us as small c conservative in the things that we do choose to actively put into production, but even though that's not really fair and not entirely true. But I think the other version of saying that that is probably that is truer is we want something that has a big heart. We want something that that sings to us very naturally and that the music soars and that the music is good. And I hate to say it that bluntly, but I also think we could do with a little bit more bluntness in musical theater development. And at the end of the day, so when we started doing the podcast, Know the Show, we started it as a part of Goodspeed. It is now no longer Goodspeed affiliated, but part of my like secret, whether I ever said it on the show, desire, who I co-host with Annika Chapin, who's the director of artistic development at Signature and a brilliant musical theater developer herself and dramaturg, and who doesn't want to listen to Annika talk about the best musicals in the canon. Part of the unwritten thesis of that podcast for me was like, okay, what is the recipe for a great musical? Like, what is it actually that makes a musical? What is the thing that connects all of these great musicals? There's got to be something that like connects all of them. And I haven't really, there isn't quite one, except that like great musicals have good music. And that may not be music that you like necessarily. It may not be like, it may be a style that is not your cup of tea, but it is good music and it resonates on an emotional level in some way. And because at the end of the day, we can talk about the book, we can talk about the staging, we can talk about the direction, we can talk about character development, and all those things are valid and real. It is called a musical. And if the music does not deliver, then it is not a musical or it's not a musical that's working. And that may sound harsh, but I just, at the end of the day, it is a musical. And whether we like it or not, and we can talk about the greatest musicals of all time because their book is phenomenal. Gypsy is not just the greatest musical of all time because or considered the greatest musical of all time because of its brilliant book and its brilliant character development. It's because the music is also really great. And like it is delivering musically and that music is delivering emotion and delivering story and delivering entertainment. And it's yeah, musicals are hard. I'm very fond of saying musicals are hard.
Well, you mentioned, Gypsy and all these classic musicals and how great they are, but they all started somewhere. They all started as a new musical. So could you tell us more about Goodspeed's Festival of New Musicals and where are you in pre-planning process and what you're looking forward to with it?
So yes, I again very fond of saying, and I say it in letters to our members and people all the time, and we've started saying it at fundraising events. Like every musical was once a new musical, and I literally just wrote in our like to that talking about our summary of new works over the year, and I was like, if you come to Goodspeed because you love classic musicals and you love like. Trust me, I love classic musicals more than you do. Like I'm with you 100%. And if new work scares you, completely agree. It scares me too. I am also you, but also all of those classic musicals that we love were once a new musical that we didn't know. And like when we think about it in those terms, like at one point, Curly singing "There's a Bright Golden Haze on the Meadow" offstage a cappella while an old woman churned butter center stage was groundbreaking musical theater. That was like genuinely shocking just because that's not how musicals started. And now it's like, oh, it's Oklahoma. It's like, okay, and like not interesting. Same deal with West Side Story. To think that a show started with like not really an overture, but just a banana, banana, and someone then snapping their finger, that's unhinged. That is unhinged. And yet it's a brilliant musical. So that is all to say, um, how we our festival of new musicals and how we create classic musicals, new classic musicals. Our process for the festival is ongoing. We're constantly reading constantly reading submissions. We don't have an open submission policy, but we obviously have a lot of connections to other New Works organizations, writers, and people that we've worked with, and people that we love, that are constantly sending us scripts. So, and between that and also the reading we do as a part of NAMT, we're touching anywhere from 100 to 150 new musicals a year, readings we go to, workshops, labs, whatnot. So in all of it, in some way, every time I am dealing with a new show or encountering a new show, I feel like the question I'm asking is like, okay, so how could we best be of service to this musical if we think that we are a match? If I think that this is, where is it going to get the most bang for its buck with us? And so all of those things, sometimes some things are ready for a music stand presentation. And that's basically when they get sorted into the festival. So we only do three musicals as a part of the festival. And it is through an educational partnership that it's all possible. So we have a casting pool of students who are 20 to 22 years old. And that is part of the charm of the festival. We don't exclude projects that don't feature young people because of that. It's the audience is like our most dedicated New Works people. They love the festival. They know what it is. But when you're in an academic setting, there are some limitations that get placed on you simply because you're dealing with a limited casting pool. So and that is a constant navigation of the festival. So, but we also like to have a wide variety of things. I like the festival to feel like a bit of a survey of new work and where things stand in the larger environment, and also the Goodspeed environment. So if we have a commission that we're ready to have at that stage, then we're going to put it in the festival. And then like, what are the exciting things that are really like, that get us excited? And maybe the best way to do that is it giving that artist a 2-week residency to work on material, and then they can share some of their work in a cabaret. Or sometimes they need the opportunity to have, 10 actors that are young, but like are hearing the material out loud, with a new group of people who haven't been developing that work with them for the last 4 years. And it is an opportunity for them to hear it with a clean slate of people who are going to ask new questions. So, yeah, that's all to say. Like there's no one answer. It's just kind of we read a lot, and it's the things that excite us, and what's the right mix of projects that feels like it is a proper survey of things that are exciting us, in the new work landscape.
So we talked a little bit about that you're on the festival committee at NAMT. You're also very much a regular at our fall events. I'd love to know if you can tell us more about how being part of an organization like NAMT has impacted your work.
And what is becoming a bit of a theme in some of my answers, I think community is hugely important. A community for fellow artists, for, all sorts of the things that means, whether that's audience, whether that's fellow artists, but in this case with NAMT, like fellow theaters that produce musicals and encounter the same challenges that we encounter as nonprofit professionals. Largely, there are commercial producers who are a part of NAMT who are wonderful, and wonderful partners to many of our organizations. But there is something about being with that group of people, and they understand what it means when you say, "Oh, I just had a board committee meeting." And they're like, "Oh, yes. Would you like ice with that bourbon?" Like, there is something about that community that is very valuable, and the relationships that grow out of that, and the ways that we can benefit each other, and the ways that we can collaborate together, even if it's not necessarily. I think people automatically assume that that means like co-pro or co-product, like, oh, we have to be producing together. But like, no, that's not what that means. It can mean all the way from like, oh, you've got a musical that you're developing at your theater, and it really needs a residency. And like, I can actually give it that residency, and that's helpful to you all. And there may be something on down the line that like is helpful in our collective desire to advance the art form and make space for artists and the art that they create. So that sense of community is really profoundly influential to me in terms of my growing as an arts administrator slash producer in a nonprofit arena. The NAMT network is like the base of my network, and the it's the base of my network. And and same goes for Donna Lynn. We talk about that a lot between the two of us, that like NAMT is a place where we feel very welcome and very at home, and on some level popular because you know people. It's like you get to see the people that you don't get to see all the time because we're geographically stretched apart. But that the connective tissue that NAMT provides, and especially during the pandemic, I mean, part of we are not shy about saying this, but when 5 years ago, which is wild to think that it was 5 years ago, that's wild, and that's another podcast. But NAMT organized like I guess like a workshop is the best way to describe it. In the early, like we were still kind of thinking that we were just going to be online for 2 weeks. We were just going home for 2 weeks, that it was still novel, or if we thought maybe we'll be back in the fall. NAMT organized a workshop about how to take your organization digital, how to pivot your organization to be more digital. And it is not an understatement to say that it was Donalyn and I did it together with a couple of the other theaters. There were like 20 of us probably on that Zoom. It is not an understatement to say it was transformational and foundational to how we weathered the next 18 months. And it is not an understatement to say that that engagement that we developed during that workshop, or the things that we developed and created during that workshop, and that became the foundation of how we interacted with our members and our audience for the next 18 months, is the reason that we are in as strong a position as we are in today. With audience, we don't really quite have the audience not returning problem at Goodspeed, and that is something we talk about a lot. And it fluctuates, right? It's not always consistent, but that engagement and those tools that we developed, what I genuinely don't think that we would have been nearly as successful if it had not been for that workshop, and that workshop wouldn't have happened without NAMT. And that was a direct result of Betsy's leadership and Adam's member services and all the people that are like, oh, what do you all need in this moment? We need to know how we're going to weather this. And they got some people in a room, and we like hashed it out and learned together. And it's hard to state how invaluable that was, truly. So if you're not a part of NAMT, highly recommend being a part of NAMT, because it's a wonderful community and a wonderful staff of humans that work for NAMT that are like continual resources.
How do you think membership organizations can better serve emerging writers and producers?
That is a really tough question. It's a surprisingly tough question, I think, actually, because in some ways, membership organizations are one step removed from the boots on the ground, right? So how is it that, and in some ways, because we even sometimes as the producers, I feel like I'm a step removed from boots on the ground, even though I am boots on the ground in like some cases. So I think it is, I don't want to just echo my last answer, but the creation of community and the networking that comes from that is super valuable. To call back to my last answer, but then to call back to an earlier answer, like providing like the potential resources, or the ideas that can let things grow, and creating the space for people to brainstorm and talk about what might be better, I think is hugely valuable because, like I said, musicals are hard, and new musicals are even harder, and there is no one right road. And for as much as I've talked about classic musicals. You know, we used to be in a place where Rodgers and Hammerstein were churning out a show every 2 years, and those shows were pretty freaking good, if I do say so myself. And same with Sondheim. Like there was a period where we we were giving writers the space and support to actually be able to create at that quality, but also at that quantity. That has really disappeared in the new works kind of world. And I have a lot of personal soapboxes about that. But I think the more that we can be in community and talk about that and start to try to find solutions to that problem, because I think everybody recognizes that that's a problem. And the more that we can think collectively about that, I think the better it is for the art form, but also for all of us as individuals and as organizations.
Michael, you're also a director. Can you talk to us more about your work as a director?
Sure. Yeah, so it's funny. I am first and foremost a director. And that's
Hmm.
like I am very passionate about, I mean, as you can probably tell, I'm passionate about sharing stories and telling stories. And I like the way that I process the world is through stories. And maybe too much of an overshare, had therapy today, and the amount of times that I'm like, so you know how in this happens, like I'm that's just the way that I process the world. So I just don't know another way to exist than to um than to do that and to share stories. And I think musicals are the best. Musicals are the best. Sorry, they are. I love other things too, but musicals rock. And so I'm very passionate about directing musicals and specifically classics. I do really love the classics. And I'm really passionate about making them feel as authentic as they can be, which is a I feel like surprisingly rare that people want to do that. And I think it's put a lot of these classic shows into negative light over the years because in the abstract or their sentence long version of what their story is, it's very icky. But actually like they're just reflecting the complicated lives that we all lead, and things can't really be boiled down quite so easily. But it's surprising how I think insensitive people are with some of those shows that have become be known as the greats and take them for granted, and that they just kind of direct themselves. And I don't actually think that they do. So I love to do that kind of work. I directed a production of My Fair Lady about a year ago that was kind of high concept, but it was a situation where I love My Fair Lady. I love it. I've loved it from the time I was 6 and saw it, and I don't know why 6-year-old redheaded Michael liked Marnie Nixon singing for Audrey Hepburn so much, other than he was gay. I don't understand, but I did. And I've loved it always. And that show, I'll use it as an example, I think has over the course of the years, like people think of it as this show of pomp and circumstance and big costumes and big orchestra and lavish and all, and then like it has maybe dated gender politics, and especially around the last revival in New York, there was a lot of conversation. It was lumped into a category of why are we still doing this show, along with a couple other shows that we won't go into for the sake of time. But I don't think that's a fair perception of that show. I think the show has always been quite critical of Henry Higgins and his misogynist. He's always been a misogynist. That's the point. It's not an endorsement of misogyny. It's a condemnation of misogyny, and that is the basis in Pygmalion. And you're not directing Pygmalion. You're directing My Fair Lady, but how can that influence the way that we're telling My Fair Lady, and seeing it in the way, frankly, that I always saw it, which was not as a romance between these two people, but as a a journey of self-discovery for Eliza that Henry is part of, and in so doing, he changes or learns something about himself that he didn't know previously. And so I'm very passionate about doing things like that because, and so we did it in a very intimate. We stripped it down. It was not a big pomp and circumstance. It was in a studio setting with very not set. It was, and we did the show in a way that nobody kind of expected or thought. And I think everyone thought I was a little crazy, but I was like, at the core of this musical is a phenomenal play by George Bernard Shaw, and that was adapted very well and is a very strong piece of text. And I think if you let that text be the star of the show instead of the beautiful costumes, instead of the 27-piece orchestra, I think actually people are going to see it in a new light that will reveal it in the way that I think is its truest form. And I'm very proud to say that it was received that way. It was a production of students. It was a student production that I directed. And but you've got 18-year-old kids who are first years in school, and they're coming to see the show that the upperclassmen they idolize are in. But it's a 3-hour thing in a studio setting, and I was like really fully prepared for people to be like not into it, not engaged, or like I don't really know why we're doing this. And by the time we got to the final scene of the two of them in Mrs. Higgins' garden, they were snapping, they were oohing, they were like as involved in the argument and as involved in the characters as I think you could possibly be. And the flip side is it was in Hartford, it was at the Hart School, and they have a somewhat subscription audience that's a typical whiter hair, like very excited to see My Fair Lady. And I was like, I don't know how these people are going to respond to it. I hope that they also like it. And to a person, they were all just gobsmacked. And I had a number of people say, I feel like I'm seeing My Fair Lady for the first time. And not that it felt like a breath of fresh air. It wasn't a like, oh, we did something radical and I directed it any differently than I would direct a big, lavish production. It just was like, let's focus on what actually is going on here and the intellectual argument that is being had that then lifts with song. So that's like a case study of what I like to do as a director. But the job at Goodspeed, as you can imagine, based on what I said, keeps me pretty busy. So happy to take any directing jobs that people want to send my way. But I do luckily have a full-time job that keeps me pretty busy.
What values do you hold closest or do you feel guide you in both your directing work and in new works development?
That's a great question. And you all even somewhat prepped me with these questions, and yet in an attempt to be authentic, I was like, don't pre-answer them, Michael. Just have the conversation. Um, on some level, I think I have to be guided by what I am interested in and what excites me and what I get passionate about. There are probably themes, motifs, styles, genres even that automatically appeal to me or that I'm more predisposed to that probably guide me on some level. But at the core, I want each show to be as authentically itself as it can be and the best version of itself that it can be. And that's somewhat filtered through my perception of that show and how I feel about it. And, so that takes different forms in different ways. But, as I love musicals, I love classic musicals, but I'm also like, there are a number of things that I think people would be shocked to know that I love that I'm like, oh, I could never create that. I don't think I could ever direct that, but do I love it? Oh my God. Like, yes. Like I joke, I use Rent as an example there. I'm like, I would love to direct Rent. I don't think anyone is ever going to ask me to direct Rent. And even if they did, I think I'd be like, are you sure you want me to direct Rent? Like, are you sure? Because I will. I just don't know if it fights a lot of my impulses, but like I love it. And same goes for like American Idiot, like some of the like some more contemporary kind of things. But like anything that has beautiful, powerful storytelling, I'm gonna be into. And so that does really that guides me is how can I be of most service to each individual show and its journey, whether that's as the director or a creative producer that is helping guide it, or even just giving it the space in which to grow.
And what's one change you'd love to see in how new musicals are developed?
I feel like I sort of answered this already, but I would love for us to figure out how we can get out of it. Take 7 years to get a show from first draft to production. I would love for us to figure that out. Because I think it's a real problem. I also think that we have, in some ways, too few creatives working on too many shows. And without naming names, if one director is developing 10 shows, the likelihood is that each of the shows is getting their 1/10 of their best ideas. And the same can be said of any creative being on some level. Some things will take priority because you have more passion for them than others. And I realize the economics of the arts. I'm all too aware of the economics of the arts. But I wish that we could be a little more focused on single projects at a time because I think it would actually be better for a lot of those projects. And we might actually be more productive than trying to do seven at once. And I mean that as like producers and directors and right. Like I mean that in that sense, not like producing theaters. Of course, we're gonna have to produce more than one show. I don't mean it in that way. I just mean like in terms of fostering new work development. I wish that we could. I wish that were a thing. I feel like there was something else I was gonna say too, but that's sort of well, I also think, and this is unpopular, I think. So don't throw things at me, podcast listeners. Don't get in my mentions. I do think also sometimes we have to be braver as creative producers about telling writers and directors that no, that's a bad idea. Actually, don't do that. Or like, actually, that's not a good song, or that scene doesn't make sense. And saying, no, I believe you can do better. I do believe in creating an environment where creatives can challenge each other. And it's not about like, it's not when it's not about ego. It's just like, no. if I direct something and I directed the scene poorly and you as the writer are like, no, I think you just misdirected the scene. I think it will work if you do this. Tell me that. Like we should be able to have that frank conversation and respect each other enough as collaborators that it's not about, oh, I'm right and you're wrong. It's like, no, I just think it with a little shift or like whatever, or be interrogate things a little bit deeper and also have the confidence to say like, no, I think you can write a better song. I think you're capable of writing a better song that is not a skip track. So those are my like three answers to one question. I just talk. You know, in some way I'm just like talk, jabba, 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 jabba. Pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little.
Love it. I love it.
Well, it is a podcast. If you don't
It
talk,
is a
there'd be a lot of
podcast.
silence.
It
So
is
I'm okay
it is
with
a
that.
podcast, and I am unfortunately a white man, so it is my medium. Unfortunately. Sorry to say, everybody. Sorry to say.
Let's talk about something that excites you. But about, what excites you about the new musicals and where they're headed?
I am really excited that I think we are exiting I think we are exiting a tough period post-pandemic where I think we're on the cusp of really exiting like, oh, only one type of musical is being created or, existing in a certain space. And I mean that particularly Broadway. And I get a little fussy when people want to say that like Broadway is not the only theater that matters. And that is 100% true. Of course not. But I also just want to play the Miranda Priestley speech from Devil Wears Prada and say like, you think that the cerulean blue you're wearing has nothing to do with what happens in this room, but like what happens on Broadway does feed the entire industry. And I think it is really exciting that like this year, it's not like one small little musical that is maybe the big hit. It's not even just one like, oh, big movie musical adaptation that is the big thing. Like there are multiple of each. And I think that is really exciting. And I hope we can hold on to that because I think there is space for excellence in all of those things. You know, it's not just maybe Happy Ending is not the only small critic darling musical that is playing on Broadway right now. Operation Mincemeat is the same deal. And it's not even just like, oh, the two of them are trying to crowd one lane. Like you also have Dead Outlaw. And I think that's a really exciting place to be. And also an exciting place when you've got like Boop, Smash, and Death Becomes Her that are all like in a completely different lane. And that's not even mentioning all the other shows that are opening. I think that's a really good place for us to be. And I don't think it's quite been where we've been at in the last couple of years. So I'm excited that the variety that I do see on the horizon, I think is really great and really exciting. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we are on the way there, and that is exciting to me.
And what's your favorite thing about working in new musicals?
There are few cooler things than to be in a room where you are the first person to hear something. And it's not always like sometimes that stuff is not very good. Totally fair. That is whole 100% real. Go back to my comments on like new musicals are scary. Yes, totally agree because sometimes they're bad and that's totally okay. But like there are also times where you're the first person to hear someone play a song. And that happens to the Grove all the time. It's like someone walks in like, I just wrote this song. I just wrote it. And everyone's like, yay, because everybody in that room understands what a task that is. And then to hear someone share it, and then when it's good, it's like, oh my God, I feel like every teenage girl is going to be singing that in like 5 years. And I I just heard it like for the first time. Like what? Like someone made that, let alone this person that I'm like sharing oxygen with made that. And when you and the case that where you can call them a friend, there's a show that we are developing called The Snow Goose that I'm very excited about that was Donalyn's idea and Scott Gilmore and Claire McKenzie, who are NAMT Festival alums and now dear, dear, very close friends of mine. And that we commissioned to write the show, and we did in the festival. And there was a section of the show. It's based on a novella by Paul Gallico, and there's a section, and the story ends at Dunkirk, at the evacuation of Dunkirk, is basically where this story goes to make the long. Well, it's a short story, but to get to the point. And the section at Dunkirk that they had written before the festival, it just like wasn't working. And we were like, yeah, team, like that's the area you need to focus on with the festival. Like it's just not like it's not quite getting it. Like don't know what to say it is, but like I don't think that that's it. And I walked into their final read through before their presentation was the next day, and it was festival weekend. And as Skye knows, if you run a festival, like the actual time of the festival is like you're booked within an inch of your life, and you're like going, 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 and hopping from place to place, and you've got the clipboard and you've got all the different things. And I had the like 10 minutes to walk in and check in at rehearsal, and they were doing the Dunkirk section, and it was good. And I'm gonna get emotional. But I was just sitting in the corner of the room and I was like, wow, my friends made a thing and it's good. Like my friends made a thing and it's really good. And my other friend music directed that thing, and my other friend directed that thing, and all these kids that I've been a part of educating helped get it to that point. And that's a really special, special thing, I think. So I think that answers that question. But to
Yeah.
hear, yeah, to be a part of hearing something for the first time, that's really exciting.
Yeah, super special. Oh, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an amazing conversation. Before we let you go, we have a couple of rapid fire questions for you.
I'm ready. I've been
So,
prepared somewhat with the rapid fire. I'm ready. Let's
oh,
go.
great. Okay. So, what was the first musical you ever saw, and what do you remember about it?
So if we're gonna talk about live experience sitting in a theater, it was Peter Pan.
Yeah.
It was Peter Pan, and it was a local summer stock production of Peter Pan that actually I helped revive that summer stock a number of years later. And the woman that I helped
Oh,
revive it
cool.
with played Peter Pan, which is very special. But then like a year later, I saw Kathy Rigby do it on tour, which is also very special.
Mm,
So I think the
very
answer in
cool.
terms of live theatrical experience, definitely Peter Pan.
Love. Favorite opening number of all time?
Okay, so I am going to say, I'm going to say the prologue of Into the Woods because it's the prologue of Into the
Love.
Woods.
Yeah. Great. Do you have a favorite composer or writing team?
Rajan and Hammerstein, without question.
First musical you fell in love with?
I think that I think that answer has to be either The Sound of Music or Mary Poppins, the films specifically. I think that has to be the answer. They are my lifelong loves. But if we're going to talk about like musical that like I touched and I was like, oh, that
Mm.
first, well, it's either Carousel or Gypsy.
I don't think you can go wrong with either of those answers.
Uh,
So,
some people will tell you that you'll go wrong with Carousel, but that's another podcast.
well, Michael, thanks again for joining us today and introducing yourself and your work to the listeners. Where can folks learn more about you and your work?
You can absolutely follow me on any social media. My handle is almost always just my name, Michael Fling. And I also have a website, michaelfling.com, but it's out of date and definitely needs to be updated. But and follow Goodspeed on socials and stuff too, because I'm often on those channels doing stuff, and we're on TikTok and all the different things. So there are lots of ways to follow me, stalk me, and get in my mentions and tell me how wrong I am about my opinions about something.
Thank you so much again for coming on today. It was great meeting you, talking to you, and introducing you to all the listeners out there.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, of course, we also want to thank this week's co-host, Skye Cone Ivey, for joining us today as well.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So once again, I am your host, Jean-Paul Yovanoff, and on behalf of NAMT and MTR, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in the theater.